Well, thank you, everyone, and appreciate that quick break. So, again, my name is CJ Reynolds, and we appreciate that you've come out today to learn and help us think about critical issues that we're facing regarding sea level rise. So, I'm extremely pleased to have been asked to moderate this panel. I know there's many, many more smarter people than I on this, but I'm very, very interested in business partnerships. So the opportunity to moderate and hear and talk with these people to learn more about what they're doing in the era of climate change is particularly of interest to me at the Regional Planning Council as we build our collaborations with partners, with businesses and organizations, both large and small. So today, we have 3 panel members that are here to share our insights about how what actions their businesses are taking and how other businesses can address and cope with the things that are changing regarding the climate and our economy. So today, first, we have Lorrie Belovich, who is the Executive Director of the Sustany Foundation. Erica Harris, who is a coastal and climate scientist with AECOM, which is a large engineering and planning firm. And Justin Smith, who's a project director and airport architect at the Tampa International Airport. So each of them will speak on the topic from his or her perspective regarding what their organization has been doing, some major projects that have been underway, and then we'll get to discuss the key issues in greater depth. So we're going to start with Lorrie. She's going to talk for about 5 minutes, and we'll do 5 minutes with Erica, 5 minutes with Justin, and wrapping up things, and then we'll come back to the overall sort of conversations that you want to ask. Oh, excuse me, I want to say Lorrie, Justin, then Erica. Sorry, there's some goals here.
Great, thank you. As CJ mentioned, my name is Lorrie Belovich. I am the Executive Director of the Sustany Foundation. We are a small local nonprofit that are dedicated to advancing the sustainability agenda in the Tampa Bay region. We've actually been serving businesses for over a decade. We were founded in 2000 by Jan Roberts. I don't know if many of you may know her name, but she was a climate change and sustainability champion. She started Earth Charter, which was a global effort modeled after the United Nations Climate Compact. And we are basically that organization today, so it's grown quite substantially over the years. What we do basically is we have a variety of small grants and mini grants. I know from this morning a lot of you are concerned about the big global issue, but what we do is sort of help bring it home. So what can you do on a daily basis to lower your carbon footprint? We work with companies as well. We work with small businesses that are very interested in looking at how they can become more sustainable. There's a lot of moving parts and pieces, and I think that a lot of people are paralyzed by hearing all the things that need to be done. And so what we really can do is work with businesses. There's a lot of free resources out there for you to help you. So if you personally or if you know businesses that want to act in more sustainable ways, specifically lowering their carbon footprint, there's plenty of services out there to assist you. I know we're going to talk about some best practices a little later in the session, so I will save that for now.
Okay, great. Justin.
Okay, my name is Justin Smith. I'm, as CJ mentioned, I'm a project director and also architect at the airport. I also manage the sustainability initiative for the airport. I've been fortunate to have been at the airport now for about 4 years, but I was also a consultant with the airport for several years before that. And I've seen sustainability grow and evolve at the Tampa airport. In 2014, we officially and formally presented our sustainability management plan. Many of those aspects have made their way into our design criteria manual that go into all of the projects we do. That was where it started. It really started with the built environment, if you will, so the vertical as well as the horizontal. And from there, it's grown into part of our culture at the Tampa airport, other initiatives beyond just what we're looking at from a constructability standpoint. We manage 4 airports, so you all know the Tampa International Airport, or at least I hope you do. We also have 3 general aviation facilities that all have very different characteristics. One is on Davis Island, very, very vulnerable to sea level rise, as well as any kind of weather event should it come through the Gulf. Tampa Executive over by I-4 and 275, as well as in an airport, municipal airport in Plant City. From a programmatic standpoint, one of the things that we're looking at, and I think this is starting to become an industry standard, is resiliency studies for our airport, understanding that we, and I think this goes back to our relationship with the Tampa Ability Regional Resiliency Coalition, is we understand that at the airport, not only do we have a responsibility to our customers, the people that are flying in and out on a daily basis, but also we have a responsibility to our community. In an event, many of the goods and things that we need, whether it be Red Cross, FEMA, the immediate response, or even long-term, are going to come through our airport. We're growing as a cargo facility. We're getting passengers in and out on a regular basis. We recognize that we have a role to play in the region's community resiliency programs and initiatives. So we have to look at this as how do we maintain operations in all aspects of resiliency. And for us, it's not just about climate. We're also looking at operational resiliency. And so that takes into a different set of issues that we're not really dealing with today when we talk about sea level rise. But those are the types of things we're looking at: cyber attacks, active threats that happen with airports. We all can think of the events that have happened around the world. But what we're doing currently is going through an assessment of our resiliency of our facilities at the Tampa International Airport, and understanding where our risks, what the risks are, and where our vulnerabilities are. Understanding that we're a 24/7 facility. We maintain that 24/7 status at all times. We operate differently than most businesses because of that. We're also back in, I mentioned the Sustainability Management Plan. The FAA provided funding for airports in 2011, 2012 to create sustainability management plans, and we're in the process now, after 5 years of having it implemented, going back and reassessing that to a management plan that really is reflective of the culture that we have at the airport, as well as the best practices and lessons learned from our recently completed $1 billion master plan development. Many of those things that we've learned through that process with assistance of our consultants will be included in that management plan update. We're also proud to say that we are a carbon accredited airport. There's only about 40 airports in the country have this airport's carbon accreditation certification. All 4 of our airports have this certification now. Our GA facilities, there are only a few GA facilities in the entire country that have this. We in Hillsborough County Aviation Authority have 10% of the carbon accredited airports in this country. We're very, very proud of that. For us, leadership starts, this whole initiative starts with our leadership from the top down. Our CEO is involved in CEO councils for all airports throughout the country. He's on panels talking about his passion for this. He came from Dallas-Fort Worth. If anyone's familiar with what they're doing, they're a leader in sustainability for the airport industry. Other things that we do, we have our fleet. We manage our fleet and are trying to increase our numbers of alternative fuel vehicles. We have 42% of our vehicles right now. Of those, about 65% are CNG. So should there be a fuel shortage, should there be issues with the port and fuel getting to us, we can still operate around our facilities because we have CNG that is typically more resilient because it's piped from outside of the state. We also are looking for, I'll call it, things that aren't on a large scale, but at the small scale. Lightning events. In the summertime, we have lightning that happens. We typically have to close the ramp on average about 115 to 120 times a year for separate events because of lightning. Aircraft can't come and go in those situations. We can't get crews out to get people off the planes. We're in the process of putting in a parking system that will allow the passengers to get off the planes rather than sitting on the airfield burning fuel, which is a greenhouse gas, for an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on how long they sit. We also just recently created an emergency management and resiliency department. And again, this goes back to the operational aspect that I mentioned a little while ago. They're really looking at how we function, everything from TSA shutdowns, right, to our power grid, microgrids, how we're affecting and dealing with sea level rise. This group is going to be a department that's going to coordinate all of those different entities between our police department, our fire department, our planning and development department. They're going to ultimately manage all of this. And that's something that's happening in airports around the country. From a master plan standpoint, all of our buildings are exceeding current energy standards. The main terminal expansion that we just did was 35% more efficient than the energy code in Florida, which is also one of the more progressive energy codes in the country. Our rental car facility, which we're very proud of, is 25% more efficient, and it also recycles water for all the cars that come through there a day. I'll give you an example. The month of January, we had 115,000 cars come through that rental car facility, and that's one of our slowest months. So that gives you an idea. We're looking at duplicity of systems, from our HVAC systems to our backup generators and all the options that we can utilize to make sure that our systems stay online should there be an issue with receiving power from the grid, whether that be microgrid, whether that be solar. We support TECO in their solar efforts. We have a 2 megawatt facility on top of our economy parking garage that they lease from us as a solar farm, and they're looking at expanding that. We're in discussions with them for that. We also look at daylighting systems. We have a heat safety program. For those who don't know, aircraft can't take off as the heat rises. It makes it more difficult for aircraft to take off. So the loads have to be lighter. They have to burn more fuel. And so we have that measure that we're trying to look at to understand what an increased temperature does to our operations, but also then our staff. We have staff that work out in the airfields, on the lawns in the airfield, but also our construction employees. How do they deal with elevated heat levels from making sure that they stay cool and safe? And one of the other things that we're doing from a stat standpoint, most of you may not know all of these things, but we have decreased our energy consumption even though our facilities have grown, right? We've added 2 million square feet at the rental car center. We added about 75,000 square feet at the main terminal. We're 10% lower energy consumers now than we were in 2011. So we've reduced our energy consumption by 10% for every passenger that's come through since 2011. So that just sums up some of the things that we're doing. Excuse me.
Oh, that's a fantastic list. It's very exciting to hear about that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, we take it very seriously. We're passionate about what we do. We're definitely looking out for the community, and we strive to be industry standards for the aviation industry.
Great, thank you. Erica.
Hi, everyone. So as CJ mentioned, I am a coastal and climate adaptation specialist with AECOM. And I have a master's degree in coastal oceanography, and I focus on trying to understand how climate change could exacerbate coastal hazards. And at AECOM, I'm a part of a climate adaptation services group. And the work that we do, the goal of it is to try to help clients to understand, and identify their key vulnerable areas and their key vulnerable assets. So what do they need to function day to day? And once those vulnerabilities are identified, then we work with them to try to develop these adaptation strategies and an implementation plan so they can try to offset some of those issues. And we work with a wide variety of clients. We work on the municipal side, so with a lot of different cities and counties. We also work in the private sectors. We work with a lot of airports and seaports and even some small and large businesses. In addition to working with a wide variety of different client types, I also have worked in many different geographic areas. Since I was hired at AECOM about 6 years ago, I've lived in the San Francisco Bay Area for a couple of years. I lived in Seattle for a few years, and now I'm here in the Tampa Bay area as of about a year and a half. And I can tell you I won't be moving anytime soon because I love it here and I'm going to be here for a while. But in the benefit of living all these different geographic areas is that I've worked on different projects from across the country, and it's given me insight into how different groups are preparing for climate change and climate hazards. So for example, I'm working right now on a project with the San Diego International Airport, and we're developing a climate resilience plan for them. And so we're looking at a suite of climate hazards varying from changing precipitation patterns to changes in fog, sea level rise, extreme heat. So we're trying to understand how these different variables could have an impact on airport operations. And one of the interesting things about this project is that in addition to developing climate adaptation strategies to help them to be prepared or offset some of these climate issues, we're also looking at embedding targets and metrics so they can track this through time. So they can track their progress to meet these different climate change goals that they've set for themselves. And this is something that's not always implemented into climate adaptation plans, but it's something I think is really important. Not only can the airport track it for their own purposes to make sure that they're meeting their goals, but they can also share this information with others like the public or their board, so that they can be held accountable for the goals they've set. We also just wrapped up a cross-sector sea level rise response plan for the city of Olympia in Washington, which also includes the Port of Olympia and the local Clean Water Alliance. And this project is significant because the strategies we developed, we have to try to think about how they could provide co-benefits and cost-sharing opportunities for all three sectors that we were involved with. And then lastly, I want to point out that AECOM is a strategic leader for 30 of the cities that are part of the 100 Resilient Cities program, which is funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. And this program is really innovative. It's been around for about a decade now, and I think it's really changed the way that we think about resilience. Instead of treating resilience as its own separate topic or have it be one person or one department's responsibility, it really tries to embed resilience into the DNA of a city. And one of the ways that it's been so successful in doing this is that it's really empowering and tries to bring different groups like businesses and local organizations to the table so that they can be a part of the decision-making process and can create this sense of ownership in creating and building a resilient city. And so through these different projects, I've learned that equipping businesses they need with the tools to protect their people and their assets and their supply chains, you can really have a large impact on the local and regional economy. As you know, businesses serve a large role in job creation and economic vitality of a city. So when businesses can recover quickly following a large storm event or a natural disaster, then the loss in productivity and profits that typically follow these kind of events in the face of city, they can be dramatically reduced. So to summarize, a resilient business community will support economic growth and stability and will naturally strengthen the overall resilience of the city itself. Therefore, that's why I feel that it's very important that both cities and businesses work together to try to prepare for climate change today. And so I'm really happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and your questions and what your concerns are, and I'm happy to share any insight or lessons learned that I have through my project experience.
I really appreciate all of the insight that you all bring to this. I have a list of questions. I know it's not my personal Q&A time, but to give you time to put in your challenging questions. So with business resiliency, there's a couple of different aspects I would like for each of you to tackle. One is the concept of a business has a network of businesses like suppliers that they work with or customers that rely on their services. So how can an organization, how can a business, what should they do? Are there some business best practices for ensuring that you know what you need to do, how you connect with your network, and what else you can do to ensure that your network is going to be resilient, particularly if you're all in the same geographic area. So any thoughts on that?
Well, there's a really interesting public case out there. I think, again, it's a multidisciplinary, multi-pronged problem, so there has to be a multidisciplinary, multiple-pronged solution. Resiliency, I think a lot of companies are looking at much of what we talked about today, the building the infrastructure, what's my vulnerability here and now, but taking it a step further, you have to look up and down your supply chain. What is the vulnerability of people in your supply chain, your customers, your entire life cycle of your product. And then ultimately, what are you going to do to mitigate that and reduce it? One famous, not famous, but a project that Starbucks, I know they're not the beacon of sustainability, but one of the unique things that they're doing is, I'm sure you've all heard the reports that because of the temperature rises, that coffee beans are at risk. We're losing a lot of our coffee beans. So, Starbucks is looking, and that's their business, right? Coffee.
My new
So,
fear.
right. So, they're not looking 5 years down the road. They're looking 10 years down the road. What's going to happen to those suppliers that they get their coffee from, the coffee beans? So they're putting plans in place now to support those farmers, those fair trade farmers. So they're looking way down the line, and way past their 12-month, 32-month cycle in terms of how are these risks going to affect their business, and then trying to go all the way down to their, very basic supplier and mitigate some of the damages there.
Thank you.
So we operate differently than most businesses because in many ways we're a small city, right? We have a police department, we have a fire department, we have people that are constantly coming and going, we have facilities that we manage. While we are a business, it is somewhat different than say your normal corporation. However, I think something that I was at an event the other day, and Lorrie may be able to speak to this as well, where it was representing capital investment in sustainability, and you as consumers have the ability to vote with your dollars, right? So in the idea of say Starbucks, they had the ability to put something out in front of the population with straws or the supply of coffee beans that a smaller chain may not have that, may not be able to do. And you as a consumer can support that or not support that based on how much you are willing to spend at that facility. So I think from a corporation standpoint or a business standpoint, to not do anything is almost like years ago, 20 years ago, dumping poisons directly into the water stream. Not doing anything anymore is not acceptable. It's not acceptable as part of the social conscious. So businesses that make decisions from a policy or implementation standpoint, or even have the integrity to stand up for something that they believe in, ultimately get support by consumers nowadays. And you have that power to find those businesses, seek them out, and spend your dollars there, whether they're local or national.
And then I would say collaboration is a key term that I want to emphasize a lot. Collaborate with other business owners that are nearby you. The more you get your message out about what climate impacts might mean for your business, and the more you share that information with others, you can start to sort of band together. You could even create like a resilience hotspot or vulnerability hotspot that may get more attention and get more funding, and more attention from the city means that they'll help you to be better prepared. You could even do like special flood hazard areas, or special, what do they call it, like a flood tax district, where you can band together and you will help to pay to better armor your area and develop a more area-wide strategy to provide flood protection. Even just performing your own vulnerability assessments, so understand what your weak areas are, so that way you can elevate your electrical facilities, for example. That's one that's critical for everyone. And then just invest in climate smart development, so doing things like solar panels, flood protection for your entryways, things like that. So there's a lot that can be done at the business level.
These are great comments for business owners. The context that we face, and many of you know from our communities, that we have a lot of our sort of small restaurants in different areas, our retail strip malls, is that in many cases, the small businesses that we enjoy and that we go to and we get cool stuff from do not actually own the buildings that are there. So a lot of the property is owned by somebody else, and the businesses are there as tenants, just like when you have homeowners or apartments, you have tenants there. So sometimes there can be a disconnect between what the property owner is willing to invest in to enhance, to whether provide energy efficiency elements that might reduce their energy consumption, upgrades and infrastructure. So I think there's a challenge there that we could attack. The question is regarding the flood component. So I think, have you seen any, and I guess this gets to Erica because she's been a part of that Resilient 100 program. have we seen any effective ways of really bringing the property owners together to discuss what they're willing to do versus the businesses that are actually generating the actual economy and serving with goods for the citizens in the neighborhood?
That's a good question.
And maybe it's something we should tackle separately. Maybe it's the next conference. I don't know.
So you mind stating the question one more time?
So the question is, currently there's a disconnect between the actual small businesses who provide the goods and services and then those who actually own the land or the buildings there. And so they have different motivations for controlling costs and controlling losses. So I just wondered if you had seen any other cities that had done interesting or effective business programs for resiliency.
I haven't seen any programs in place. I mean, I think it goes back again to business owners, whether or not you own the land or the building that it's on, just collaborating with each other and making sure that your message is known about what the impacts could mean for your facility. And you could also invest in generators, so that if the power does go out, then you can protect your business depending on what it is. It might be something that's really useful to you. But I haven't seen any programs, sorry.
Justin, tell us about your the program for assessing, I guess you'd call it sort of upgrades or major system changes. Tell us about the cost-benefit analysis and how diverse or integrated might it be, so we can learn more about this.
I think we have a fairly robust maintenance program at the airport where we have things on, basically look at life cycle analysis for all of our systems. And we look at, try to schedule out in our capital improvement program over the next 10, 12, 25 years how those recurring cycles may come about. For instance, we replace chillers every 30 years. We replace carpet every 10 years. So there's different cycles we go through. And some of it depends upon what those entities are. That's one way. And when you're doing that, a couple things happen. You're getting more current technology, but then we also look at with our new infrastructure, making sure that we are pushing beyond what is just, say, standard, right? So we support building beyond just what the basic standard might be, adding those additional costs to include chilled water lines for cooling mechanisms, or to include solar as a part of the project, even though it may not necessarily have been something that was originally intended. It's part of what we have to consider, and from a maintenance and operational standpoint, we are the tenant in many cases, that building tenant for so many entities. It's definitely something that, as a tenant, you want to make sure that if you believe in those things, you are getting space from people that also have similar beliefs. And then as an owner, it keeps your bottom line down. I mean, ultimately, like I said, we've reduced our energy, and yet we've increased our space. How do you do that? You make more efficient systems. You find different ways to use sustainable strategies that allow you to lower your energy costs, whether it be daylighting, whether it be conversion to LED, whether it be a removal of your dependence upon petroleum-based products and services. It's all in what your goals and what your aspirations are, how committed you are to it, and then what you plan to do with those dollars that you intend to spend.
So I'd like to switch. We've talked a lot about the capital investments and some processes, and I want to throw the idea out, and then I want you to start thinking about your questions and bringing them up. What innovative strategies or plans have each of you seen regarding both energy efficiency or carbon reduction or other resiliency?
There's one that's recently just been announced, and I think it kind of goes back to what every speaker and every panel has talked about, just sort of transformative thinking, right? If we're going to solve the problem, it's going to take something very transformative and disruptive. My favorite example is Loop. I don't know if you've read about Loop. I think it's a partnership with TerraCycle. Several other product brands, Haagen-Dazs is one. But I wrote this down because this was sort of the idea is almost like a club, you buy into a club so that it's a packaging. So they're dealing with the packaging, the plastic waste issue, and waste obviously is a carbon emissions. One of the 40% of carbon emissions, GHG, are coming from waste. So we got to eliminate the waste. So they have a membership, and I think Haagen-Dazs is one. There's a couple cereal brands, Quaker Oats, where they're launching it in New York, in New Jersey, and in several places in New York, where you get a container. You're mailed your product, your ice cream, your cream of wheats in a container. It's a metal container. You empty it out. You have a little box that you put the container back in. You ship it back just like a return envelope with Amazon. They pick it up. You order your next round. You get new ones, and then they recycle and they reuse that. So it's a complete closed loop. The innovative idea there, none of that is new. But what I love is what the founding member of TerraCycle said is, we need to start thinking about packaging as a service. That's a disruptive idea. So we're taking the whole industry of packaging and now we're making it a service. So the business is no longer making the packaging, it's providing packaging as a service. That's a disruptive idea that might change the way we think about things, and it's an opportunity.
I think I'll go back to the 100 Resilient Cities example as being innovative. In one of the ways that they were so innovative is, as I said, bringing people to the table, even just local communities. But they really just emphasize pulling back the cover and seeing what capabilities and who the key players are within your own community. So say if you have a community that you haven't been able to reach, an underserved population, then you can have someone who's like a local organization that focuses on that, or local church groups that are able to reach out to them. That's much more effective than hiring somebody outside of the local area and having them do the work, because they understand some of the political and social and even the natural forces that are affecting those areas.
I think I can come up with two right away. The aviation industry, so the airlines are looking into biofuels as an alternative to jet fuel. It's more sustainable, it's more available. There's some delivery issues with it, but it's a kind of an emerging market, if you will, to reduce, again, that dependency on petroleum-based fuel products. The other is something that came out of a conference or a meeting I was set in last week with the Tampa Bay Clean Cities Coalition, that electric vehicles essentially can serve as backup generators for your home or a business. So one example was during one of the hurricanes, there were folks who were sleeping in their Tesla in their garage because there were no fuels, and it was the only air conditioning that they had in the middle of the heat, right? Another example was the fact that there are devices that will allow your car to go bidirectional with how it supplies energy to your home. So a refrigerator can run off of a Nissan Leaf battery for about 60 hours. You can charge your cell phone for something like 10,000 hours. So some of those technologies that already exist are available. At the larger scale, electric buses. More and more municipalities are going that direction. We ourselves at Tampa Airport are looking at our electric vehicle fleet and looking at increasing electric buses into our fleet. That's one of the things, those buses have such large batteries that they can serve as backup generators for the public, for smaller facilities, for fuel systems, for different things that may be necessary. So those types of strategies, I think, are emerging and are quite exciting when you think about coming off of the grid or being able to reduce your carbon footprint.
That's fantastic. I now have new backup to convince my husband why we need a new electric car instead. So I have an interesting perspective to bring up. And many of you may not know this, but the Florida Chamber of Commerce Foundation has issued their report. I think it's 2020, 2030 vision, something like that. But if you look up the Florida Chamber Foundation, they have defined their plan and vision for their members and for our communities in terms of their 6 pillars that they operate under. And what I found was particularly exciting, this last couple months when I was digging up to see where these groups were at, is that they have established resiliency goals for their communities, for their cities. And I think this is a particularly important opportunity for us who are working on different aspects of resiliency to better engage our chambers of commerce. And so the coalition is actually doing that, and many of them are early partner signers. So the Tampa Bay Beaches Chamber of Commerce, woohoo, give them a thumbs up, support them. They were one of the first business partners to participate and sign up the coalition component. The Clearwater Chamber of Commerce was a long-term collaborator with the group that was the early technical advisory group, and they're going to be meeting with me to define what they think their business members want to do and learn and how we can learn together. So I would throw this out to you and then to some of y'all about, so the opportunities for the St. Pete College, the different organizations, how can we work more effectively with our chambers and get to these business groups, whether they're at downtown districts or the front line of Gulfport or wherever we are, how can we work more effectively with them to help them understand that the attitudes about climate change are changing, the concerns about resiliency, and our collective desire to ensure that our business community stays vibrant as well. What are your thoughts on how to engage those business organizations?
Well, I think, again, looking at it from the business perspective, we have to acknowledge that probably the choir's in the room here. I think we saw that a couple times, so we definitely want to grow the choir, and we want to spread awareness beyond the choir. At the end of the day, we're talking about economic development, and these groups, including the chamber and my past world, if you have my resume there in front of you, is from the economic development world. So, when you're looking at a chamber, they're looking at businesses. We're not suggesting that businesses, put everything first, above profits. We're, suggesting the triple bottom line. You've got to look at people, planet, and profit. And the statistics that just came out from, I believe it was Environmental Entrepreneur, is that Florida, I don't know if you saw these numbers, Florida is actually the third largest, it's leading the US as the third largest clean energy job creator. So in Florida, we have 158,652 clean energy jobs in our state. We're trailing only behind Texas and California. And those are in solar, wind, the largest categories, energy efficiency, and clean vehicles. And, I say all that because if you're working with the chambers and the business organizations, they're there supporting businesses. So, making this not just about doing what's good for the planet and doing it because there's a risk, but because there is a profit, there is a job creation, there's economic benefit. That's the way to appeal to those groups and grow the tent. I think we need to grow the choir, and that's a way to do that.
And then I think engaging with the chambers would be really beneficial. They could serve the role of hosting training and awareness programs for what local businesses can do, and they could even host examples of who is a champion who's already done this, what local business is already prepared, and how did they do it, and what can we learn from this. I think even distributing just emergency resource materials for small businesses would be a good role for the Chamber of Commerce. Just get them very engaged in the conversation and have them be the source point for information and kind of pulling all these local businesses together.
I think that there's opportunity out there from a sustainable impact investment standpoint to look and see what local businesses, what larger corporations can do in starting to investigate these private-public partnerships where we look at infrastructure, like Dr. McDonald's slide earlier saying that, that transformative resilience at a $20 to $30 trillion investment standpoint, you can't do that at the government level without some sense of where the money's coming from. And you can't do that without corporate investment. It's not going to happen at the private investment level. It's not going to happen at the federal government level. And so I think there are opportunities there that Chamber can help facilitate in putting these entities together that can begin to take their tax dollars, or their tax-deductible dollars, and start investing those into sustainable impact projects.
That was a fantastic idea. So first, let's just all thank them for. I'm very excited about the many ideas that have come out of here. So now it's the time to hear from you about what are your questions? How concerned are you about the local businesses in your area, that what risks they might face? What would you like to see happen in terms of any activities between local governments and the business community, or coalitions working with business groups? So any particular concerns or pet peeves, or in the back? Gentlemen, thank you.
This question's for Erica. I know AECOM worked with the city of St. Pete on our waterfront master plan. They were a big component of that. My question is, looking at the major arc of AECOM's projects, both public and private, how many of those have a climate-related component to it? Resiliency, climate planning, that might be a good barometer to see the interest across both cities and companies when you guys get engaged in those type of projects.
Well, I don't know across the entire company. It's a very large company, it's global, but I know that it's something that is growing in interest, and it's something that we try to have an active conversation with our clients, whether or not they're interested right away in considering future conditions or not. We try to make sure that they are aware of it and how it could affect their long-term operations or their long-term capabilities of their assets. So it is something that we try to bring up to them and just help to educate. And so I think it is something that's growing in frequency and in popularity for sure, which is a good thing.
Tina?
Thank you for being here. I wish we had more businesses in the room at this moment, because I think it's a really important issue to take up. They're a partner in this. I really think the answer with the floodplain, when you were talking about the businesses that are renters of that property, the chambers are one way to get to that, to provide solutions. When you have an element like that happening, you can also use the chamber as a way to solve problems that come together of common things, and also professional organizations, a bunch of the young restaurateurs and things like that, belonging to hospitality, and that's a major industry, tourism and hospitality in the state of Florida. And so if you can get to everybody within that context and do the trainings and the other things you were talking about, and also partnering in terms of how we adjust for the infrastructure and resiliency. So there are some real opportunities there. I also was thinking, wouldn't it be great if we could find a way for businesses to be able to put an item in their budget line instead of marketing as something that would be a resiliency budget, and somehow get a tax break or some other way that to make it a benefit for a business to actually budget for work toward this end. And that's something that, of course, we'd have to take to the legislature to find a way to do that, but that's another idea.
Thank you.
CJ, can we ask the question of how many business owners there are?
Sure. Yeah, we'll do that after.
So what do you say? I mean, obviously, there's the preaching to the choir, like airports. I mean, obviously, climate risks are huge, especially when, you're vulnerable to storm surge. And, I know our airport, Clearwater St. Pete, is undergoing a master plan, and they're looking at all that. And there are a lot of hospitals that are engaged in this topic and stuff like that. But I've had some conversations with businesses who basically say, is this going to affect me in 5 years? And if I can't find a way to link it to their bottom line in the next 5 years, they just blow it off. So what do you say to these businesses to try to get them to the table? I mean, because let me tell you, the emotional responses, don't get them there. Your family, your kids, don't care. I mean, it just isn't a connection point. So I'm curious as to, since you've worked across the spectrum, what do you say? What works?
Well, I think, a storm event can happen tomorrow and wipe out the business. So it never hurts to be more prepared than doing the bare minimum. So I think that's an obvious thing to point out. It's not just about preparing for climate change 50 years from now. It's about getting ready for the next large storm, because chances are the building that they're in was not designed to consider those types of forces and those types of water levels. I guess also encouraging them to do maybe a cost of inaction study versus a cost of preparing. I know climate change and preparing for it it's very expensive, but it's also probably even more so expensive to not do anything and just to let your building and your assets just become flooded, and then you have to completely rebuild. So I think that's something that's really important to consider as well.
Well, and sometimes you have to hide the carrots in the brownie, I mean, so you can always approach a company, the utilities providers will do free energy audits, solid waste will do waste audits, so you can always approach a business and say, would you like to lower your cost? You can come at it from a cost perspective. Once they see the checklist, and they start seeing the cost benefits, and then realizing there's also a social benefit, because then as they become greener, they're doing better, then they find out they have a story to tell, they're marketing, they're building, a fan club, and so, you're just trying to nudge it along. But again, you gotta mash up the carrots in the brownie.
And I was just gonna add that I think there's a couple of different types of issues that you deal with from a climate science standpoint. You have those imminent shocks that come, a hurricane, a storm event, and then you have those long-term events that people are trying to plan for and nail down the science, and that gets beyond that 5-year mark. But understanding what those risks are, and there's always, from a business standpoint, there's always the issue of capital, right? So the first thing you have to do is figure out how you're going to pay for it. If you don't put the infrastructure in place now, and you look at those long-term cost analysis documents that say it's going to be X amount on your bottom line when something does happen, if they don't have the capital up front, then regardless of what those documents say, it's very difficult for business owners, small business owners especially, to be able to put those types of investments in place. So finding a way to increase a company's business, or tax breaks, or whatever that is that would allow companies to address these more immediate issues from a resiliency standpoint, I think is critical. And then as you do that, you start to address some of the longer term issues.
Yes, Kelly, I don't want us to skip past your question, a good question. Reality check. If it doesn't affect me in the next 5 years, I don't care. I don't care about my kids. Okay, that's a reality. I'm wondering about that number. Mike, I'm not sure the number is correct. What was it, 10,000 businesses affected if we had a Phoenix come? And I'm curious if we could watch that video from the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. I didn't know it was from you. I just found it by coincidence this week. It's what, a 5-minute video? I would hope everybody could get a follow-up of the link to the YouTube, because to me, a business, large, small, would be concerned if they saw that, because they could see their employees can't get to the work. There's no manufacturing. This is our largest moneymaker here. Guess what? People can't get to the plants. So that would be short term. That's my suggestion.
Those are great ideas. I'm going to, while you get to these other folks, workforce impacts of short-term disasters are substantial. I've worked in the food industry before, and folks can say, well, our building's resilient and our fleet, we move that elsewhere. But well, what about your employees? If they're in a flood zone or their homes are destroyed, you're down because you've lost 900 people who can't come to work. Or let's say on the unfortunate side, a school is used as a hurricane shelter, which then develops lots of problems because it allows pets and there's contamination in the hurricane shelter. The school is then closed for 2 weeks. You also have people who can't go back to work because their kids can't go to school. So the cumulative effects of not being able to go to work then become a larger economic impact and a ripple. So I think this is where the collective pressure of, as consumers and citizens in a region, you can work to make sure that your businesses know and how it all works together with the government. Good ideas. Some more in the back. Reverend Russell?
Well, just to build on this, I know that in my bishop's office in Tampa, their annual auditor requires them to file a continuity of business plan in case of disaster. And I'm just thinking that anyone who's a publicly traded company has to do the same thing. And the examples you're just giving now, make it your daily business. You need to have a continuity of business plan. who doesn't have that isn't really taking care of their business. That's not a 5-year window, that's a tomorrow window, that's a today window.
And I just want to add to that too. I think we do a lot of development, right? I mentioned the $1 billion master plan that we just completed. A lot of those funds are bond funds. And I'm an architect, so I'm going to go ahead and say I'm not a financial analyst. I'm not in the finance side. I can't speak to the economy of how this gets done. But I do know that the bond companies now are looking at the agencies and saying, we want to see a resiliency plan before we'll loan you money. So those, that's how some of this stuff is starting to happen. So it's, from a risk management standpoint, it's the insurance companies, it's the lenders, it's the bond companies. It's starting to move in and having that continuity of business programs set up, whether you're large, small, municipal, small, private company. Those types of things are ultimately going to start to affect how you're able to do your business.
So maybe then one of the important things that we can do, and maybe this is something that Kelly and whether it's Sharon or any of us in different local government opportunities, is to help educate our local and regional banks and the investment pools that might exist about the potential areas for risk. Now, I know this sounds very scary about where are the bad things going to happen and what's going to happen to the flow of cash to those potential building owners. But if we bring folks together to say it's at risk, but there are things that we can do, and you, specifically property owner, can do things that can improve your resiliency, and what that may look like. So, this isn't going to be an easy conversation at any means, but it's important that we learn to talk their language, as you say, and to expand. So I'm eagerly looking for serious economists to participate in the coalition, as well as some hard-hitting administrative, finance, and insurance people. So as part of my goal of expanding our tent is to broaden the expertise where big decisions are getting made, as we all know, right? So other questions? Sir, in the middle there. Wait, hold up. Let's get your microphone. No, it's for recording.
Yeah, my question is for this area, and it's a sustainability question. A lot of companies won't come to this area because of transportation. So I want to ask the panel, how would you get better transportation? Instead of putting in more roads for cars, how would you change that?
Wow, we should go to another conference and talk, but that is a very, very big question we all care about. Anybody want to, throw some ideas out there? Is there any transportation experts in the room? I feel like I cannot answer that. I mean, it is a crux of, the transportation connections, mass transit, which reduction of emissions, which improves the environment, et cetera. We know this is an issue for the region. So
I'll say the city of Jacksonville is looking at autonomous vehicles as an extension. They built an automated people mover years ago that had grand plans of extending beyond about a mile in downtown, and that system is now at its end of life, and they're looking to replace that. And one of the things that they're planning to do, and I believe the efforts are under design, is to create a network that expands beyond that original mile, utilizes that track, but also then expands it beyond with autonomous vehicles. And these autonomous vehicles can operate as a train, so two of them can join to build on the efficiency, the energy efficiency of going from one place to the other. But then there's points at which those trains can detach and diverge so that you start to get more specific to the locations that you're going. And if you've ridden the trains at Tampa Airport, similar technology. So they're computer-based, they're geolocated, they're powered from below. There's different ways in which other cities are looking at, and that's one example where they're trying to address some of those issues that go downtown and then also, I think, across the river. So.
Oh, that's exciting. We should study Jacksonville. I heard earlier this morning there was a reference to the city of Norfolk. I have looked at their plan. They have some interesting aspects which relate to businesses, but it's also kind of a concept of resiliency zoning and development. So what kind of businesses, what you allow to be built where, and looking at that in terms of that. So Libby has a question. Can we get a microphone for her?
Thanks. I was just going to add a little bit onto the answer to that, and not my information, but Sharon is not still here, correct? because she should be speaking, I'm sure. But I did go to the St. Petersburg kind of State of the Economy address about a month ago, and you can go online and download the PowerPoint that they gave that was very informative. But they did talk about public transportation being a huge issue with businesses that they're working on recruiting. I don't remember the name of the business they recently recruited to downtown St. Petersburg that they were very proud of, but they said working with that company, it was like, there was a big conversation about bicycle storage for their employees, and very expensive bicycles, they said. So they, worked out an indoor storage facility for that. I know just through conversations with the PSTA, they are looking at various types of transportation, including a bus rapid transit that would go down kind of First Avenue North and South and mainly go from downtown St. Pete to the beach communities. And that seems like that's in the public comment period right now. So that's something you could look at. So I agree. I haven't heard plans, for what we would love to see us, be like one of the great cities where you could just hop on public transport anywhere. But it is being addressed in various ways that you could comment.
Great, thank you. Question in the middle, guy in the stripes. If you want to raise your hand so the microphone can come.
There is some thinking that to solve climate change and to solve the problems, that we need to go to a more democratic way of ownership. Cooperatives, employee ownership of businesses, and local economies. What policies would you put in place to develop and support a more equitable society?
Bravo for your question. We probably need more coffee, but I don't know if it's break time yet. But does anyone want to, you don't have to represent your company. You could throw out some things you've read, heard. I think it's an interesting question.
So was the question what policies we'd put in place to have a more equitable, what was the last part?
What policies would you put in place to develop a more equitable economy that supports cooperatives, employee ownership, and local economies?
I think that's a question for local government, actually. I've seen new initiatives, things like green purchasing co-ops, where local governments are trying to identify how things, but businesses can form their own co-ops if the interest is there in terms of return on investment. So let's say a downtown district has a bunch of small businesses and their windows are all really old and not hurricane resistant. What can we do to enable a collective opportunity to buy and get bulk and discounts and those sorts of things? But I don't think that answers your question. So this is a difficult question. I don't know, is anyone here? Another conference, okay. We'll ask Jacqueline and David to make note of that, and it's probably not a good fit for the expertise that we have on the panel, and their tremendous expertise. So let us just say thank you again to them. And I believe, am I on track for break time? Is that correct? It's 3:30 to 3:45. Okay, so now we have, we can take a break. And what time should everyone come back? End early. Okay, next person. All right, well, thank you all again for your comments today. That was very helpful.